Griffin. He's been a long-time member, and I can tell you all sorts of things about him, but I could care less. Susan, stand up. He did not even tell you that his daughter here, who is a gorgeous University of Alabama graduate, there you go, roll tide. And then she went on and she kind of belittled herself and went on to law school, but she did stay at the University of Alabama. So what more can you say? But Ken has written a number of books, but he's written this book which I think is really cool, 7 Days in July. And Ken, why don't you come on up and bring your beautiful assistant. Is she going to help you?
Yep.
Okay, what a class lady. And I forgot this young man's name, but he being a University of Alabama graduate, we're really proud to have you here. So, give Ken a good hand here.
You know, when you write your own introduction, you expect people to deliver it. Came close. When Pat called the other day and asked if I'd do this, I asked him how much time I had, and he said, oh, just whatever's reasonable. So I got out some of the talks I'd given in the past and looked at one of them and said, well, I'll go practice on this one. Well, it was an hour. So I said, gosh, I'm going to have to tweak that a little bit. So I did, and it came back an hour and 15 minutes. Hopefully it won't take that long this time. I got two matters of what I would style shameless self-promotion. That's the book. If anybody wants to buy one today, I've got some for sale. The other piece of shameless self-promotion is the young woman who's with me today. My thunder's been somewhat stolen, but she is a graduate of Woodward Academy. She's a graduate of University of Alabama. It's hard for an old Gator to say roll tide, but we're always glad when they do well. Absolutely. And she's about to get her MBA and her JD from Georgia State University, and she'll take the bar, and at that point she's going to be looking for a JOB. So if anybody needs extremely able, bright, energetic young woman, lawyer, send us a telegram. If you see my hand shaking or my feet starting to move in a peculiar way, I think I've got gout, and I know I've got Parkinson's. It's not that I'm excited about being here. But you can handle it any way you want to. So, anyway, when people talk about the Battle of Atlanta, sometimes confusion develops, and I think part of that is the names of some of the armies that are involved. The Confederate Army was called the Army of Tennessee, named after the state. The Union Army, headed up by McPherson, was called the Army of the Tennessee, or the Tennessee. And that's not the state, that's the river. McPherson's army had about 25,000 soldiers in it. Joe Johnston's Army of Tennessee had about 60,000. You say, well, that's a pretty good advantage for the South. Well, there were two other federal armies. The Army of the Cumberland, about 60,000 troops, and the Army of the Ohio under Schofield with another 20,000. The Army of the Cumberland kind of lives on today. If you drive out to where Interstate 75 and 285 converge, that's near the Cumberland Office Park, and it's named after the George Thomas's Army of the Cumberland. So as the war wound itself around, Grant was selected by Lincoln to occupy a 3-star billet and take over the overall command of both the Eastern and Western theaters. He met with Sherman in March, I think, in March 17th in Nashville, and the two of them discussed how they would go about bringing the war to an end. And it was concluded that Grant and Meade would go after Bobby Lee, where they were in Petersburg at that point, and that Sherman's army would go after Joe Johnston's Army of Tennessee and try also to capture Atlanta. Early in May, Sherman finally starts his march south. He's up in Bridgeport, Alabama, and Dalton in that area. And he sticks close to the the Western and Atlantic Railroad. He's about 90 miles from home when this talk takes place. Kennesaw Mountain is behind him, and he's poised to assault what's called the river line. It's 8 miles of fortifications along the western side of the Chattahoochee River. And once he's confronted that, that's all that remains between him and downtown Atlanta is the Chattahoochee River. So 153 years ago on July 11th, Sherman could go to the high ground around Vinings, and in fact, it's now part of a building called Overlook, stand there and see the spires of Atlanta some 9 miles away. Around that same time, Sherman took advantage of the fact that the river was cleaner than what he was standing around in, and he went swimming. I think that probably considerably interrupted the fraternization and trading that was going on between the soldiers on both sides of the river and both sides of the conflict. 6 days later, on the 17th, about a block east of here, where that Dunkin' Donuts is, in which it's apparently hard to spend $25. And judging by my physique, I've tried. The Army of the Tennessee under McPherson was moving down Roberts Road to where it combines and it becomes Chambly-Dunwoody, where that crosses Mount Vernon. Two of the corps went on south towards Nancy's Creek, and Major General Dodge of the 16th Federal Corps made a right turn onto Mount Vernon and then a left turn down Ashford Dunwoody. So he was here before us, and he'd be in good company if he were here with us. All three of these Army Corps were on their way to Decatur. Now I want to have one of these. There it is. Isn't that pretty? That's original artwork. You can tell it's artwork because you don't understand it. This is the front view of a gate. Here's the hinge post. Here's the gate post. And that is where the confluence of the Peachtree Creek comes into the Chattahoochee River. Up here shows Roswell, and this is where the first federal troops crossed, I think on the 9th, crossed at Ison's Ferry here on the 9th or 10th under Schofield. The Army of the Ohio crossed. And all of these, like a gate on a hinge post, take people so that they're going to line up about with Decatur and with Peachtree Creek. So that was the plan, to get people across the river. And from the 8th of July through the 19th, the Federal Army crossed at that point. When Joe Johnston heard about the Federals being across the river, he did what he always did when he heard anything. He retreated. This time it caught up with him. I don't know if that was the plan or not, but he was relieved by President Jefferson Davis, and he was replaced with General John Bell Hood. Hood was a one-armed, one-legged, brand new, I guess he was a 4-star at that point. his first act is to see if he can get the orders changed and let Johnson stay for the impending battle. Davis has had enough, and he says no. So on the 19th, Hood tries to get to know his command a little bit better, and he does so. And on the 20th, he fights Thomas at the Battle of what's called today the Battle of Peachtree Creek. It's Hood's first fight as an Army commander. It doesn't go very well. He loses between 2,500 and 5,000 casualties. A lack of intelligence about the enemy and about the ground, coupled with a complex plan. He was having brigades on echelon attack, and untested leadership, all of these combining with the disadvantages that are inherent in the attack versus an active, aggressive defense by 3 veteran corps of infantry. Hand just shakes. It's irritating. On the 21st day of July, there's fighting in the east side of Atlanta. And Susan, if we could put up this is a very busy map, and I apologize. We can blame Mr. Kurtz, who did this map in 1938. The inner fortifications of Atlanta are right here. This is Peachtree Creek. This is a little bit of the Chattahoochee River. This is downtown Atlanta. Here's the Georgia Railroad coming in. Here's the Western Atlantic going that way. Here's the one that runs to East Point. Of course, it's the railroads that cause Atlanta to be a focal point of controversy. This is where the Battle of Peachtree Creek took place. Here's Decatur. So we thank Mr. Kurtz for his map. Hood has been aware of the fact, because Wheeler has been saying to him, the whole world's out here trying to kill us, send us some help. The Army of the Tennessee has 25,000 troops marching in from Decatur on 2 roads. One runs by the railroad and the other one runs through Kirkwood. Wheeler's got 2,600 troops. Fortunately, the roads are only so wide you can't bring a lot of firepower to play if there's woods on both sides and you just focused on the roads. But Hood's been receiving message after message from Wheeler. So on the 21st, he formulates a plan to deal with McPherson and the Army of the Tennessee. First thing he's going to do is bring all the Confederate Army in from this outer line of trenches into the inner line around the city. This will allow him to defend that with far fewer people than what he had to defend this much bigger line with. Also will free up Hardee to maneuver. And the maneuver is going to be a great flash of insight by Hood. He says, you start right up here, take your 2 divisions that are with you, come down through the center of the city, come by the stadium today, by Harold's Barbecue, which unfortunately no longer there, the Federal Penitentiary, down almost to South River, and then take a left and start up Fayetteville Road and go on up to Decatur. He says that's 6 miles. Well, it is 6 miles from here to here, but not 6 miles when you make a triangle out of it, or whatever that is. That's referred to as the night march. And if it had been as successful as many people think, it's a lot like what happened at Chancellorsville between when Lee and Stonewall Jackson split their force and made them march in that fashion. If it had been half that successful, Hood would be celebrated by a lot more people than celebrate him today. Wheeler's supposed to meet Hardee out here. and he's supposed to capture the wagon trains that are here for the 3 corps. Hardee's going to arrive about the same time, so this is dawn, supposedly. From here to here is 6 hours. He's going to have surprise on his side, and early in the morning, he's going to be able to defeat the Army of the Tennessee in detail and roll them up. People who talk about rolling them up, I think, usually are at a desk. Despite the planning that Hood has gone into, reality takes hold, and when about half his force gets to Cobb's Mill down here, they change from a attack in the rear early in the morning to a flank attack around noon. A surprise will await them at the point of attack because Major General Dodge, the same guy who came by here and went down Ashford Dunwoody, has made it out to Decatur by this time, and he's moved soldiers right to this area. He's got about 2 divisions. It's really 3 brigades. One of the brigades has a regiment with 222 Henry repeating rifles in it. Big difference with the muzzle loader. Henry rifle weighs about 9.25 pounds when it's empty, about another pound when it's full. It's 43.5 inches long. It's a lever action weapon with 15 shots, spring-loaded tubular magazine with a 44 caliber short bullet that it fires. Soldiers bought their own weapons. They paid about $50 for these, cheapest 38 and as high as 85, I think. Federal government didn't want to buy them, but they did provide the ammunition, although the War Department bureaucrats were concerned about the amount of ammunition that might be used up. Of course, they were in Washington. These guys were in Atlanta. They're probably glad to have the ammunition. So noontime comes. Wheeler makes it. He's been on the Bald Hill. That night he goes back into town, rides down this way up here. He gets up here at a little bit after noon, and he actually does what he's supposed to do. He captures Decatur. He runs the Union forces through the city, town. They get out to the intersection of what's today called Claremont and North Decatur. It was Shallowford at that point. The Union stops and is really going to hold that position, it would appear. Victory's in sight for Wheeler, and what happens? He gets a call from Hardee that says, break it off and come on back and help me. We don't hear anything else from Wheeler that day. There are, it's hard to see these arrows, but there are 2 arrows here. This is called Terry's Mill Pond. It is a quagmire. Both Bates' division and Walker's division go through the quagmire and come out the other side. Walker is not very happy about the intelligence he's been given up to that point because he didn't learn a lot about the quagmire he was going to walk through. So he gets out at the front of his troops and is going to reconnoiter the area that he believes his next military objective is located in, and he gets out there and some guy shoots him, knocks him off the saddle and kills him. He's probably the first major casualty that the South experiences that day, and I would say that had he not been killed, perhaps the attack would have been successful. But what he saw just before the bullet hit him was Dodge's 2 divisions sitting here. So they changed an aggressive, hard-hitting, able, loyal, knowledgeable general officer for a short, fat, bald banker named Mercer. And I'm sure he's a good guy, but trade-off wasn't really that even. So Mercer's now the commander of the division, and it doesn't go very well. The poor results really come from several sources. The march itself, this 6 miles, or 16, excuse me, miles, the heat, the dirt, the horse manure, the hunger, a vague, uneasy sense that things maybe are not going all that well. Hardee's corps is probably reduced by 30% before the first gun is fired. These troops have been in combat getting ready to do Peachtree Creek, then they fought at Peachtree Creek, then the aftermath of Peachtree Creek, and now they've gotten to have this picnic over in Decatur. In addition, the Federals have picked a superb piece of property to defend. It's high and it's cleared fields before it. And as Dodge said in later days, if I'd looked all over the place, I couldn't have found a better defensive position, especially if you've got those 222 Henry rifles. The Confederate attack goes from the right. Up here, Bate is the first one, Walker's the next one. They hit this piece occupied by the Federal forces with the Henry rifles. The next one is Claiborne. Claiborne's probably the best division commander on the field that day. Some people would argue he may have been the best general on the field all the time. He was an outspoken Irishman, but he was a superb combat commander. Well, Claiborne's division is next. They attack the refused line near the east base of the Bald Hill. The Bald Hill is not this, but rather about where I-20 goes through today and where it crosses Moreland Avenue. It's the high ground in that particular area. It's a prominent terrain feature, as they used to say at Fort Benning. Claiborne had been on the hill. That night he came back this way, down here, up this way, and then came back up to the east side of the hill. It seems like he could have come around like this, but that's the way they did it. The refused end of the Union Army means that it was not in the air. It was not just a flank ending. It was bent back on itself in the shape of a fishhook, or more prosaically, perhaps a J. There's a big gap between that refused line and where Dodge was. About 800 yards separated the two of them. And as the skirmishers from Claiborne's division came through that gap, they met very little resistance, but they did find a Union officer. They told him to halt. He picked his hat up off his head and tilted it at them, changed his horse's direction, took off. He too found himself on the ground, dead. McPherson, the leader of the Army of the Tennessee, was dead before the battle started. The fight continues down here at the Bald Hill from about noon when Claiborne attacked until the sun went down. That's in July. The sun doesn't go down until late, so it was a long fight. They pushed the Federals back. It was a controlled kind of a retreat, but the Federals occupied 6 or 7 or 8 different positions, and they slowly eased back to the Bald Hill, and somebody fortuitously had installed some traversing trenches that ran off at 90-degree angles from the major north-south line. As the troops who otherwise would have had no place to go filed into those, they were able to reorganize, rearm, and resume the fight. That sounds pretty good. I like that. And fight they did. They held on until the evening came. North of this, and about where the railroad track comes down from Decatur into to cross this line, there was a place that was dug out to allow the train track to come through, and the silly Union officers did nothing about guarding that railroad cut. When Cheatham's Corps started up, they found this cut, and a couple of brigades went left, a couple of brigades went right, and they just about routed the 15th Corps. 15th Corps north of the railroad fell back to their original lines, and the 15th Corps on the south side of the railroad track were moved back substantially as well. It was really the high water mark of the attack. Well, it's always a superhero. Major General Black Jack Logan, who had assumed command of the Army of the Tennessee upon McPherson's death, is coming very hard. And when we get to go look at the cyclorama, you'll see the most prominent figure riding the big black war horse named, what is that damn horse's name? I can't think of it, I apologize. Slasher is his name, a kind of a non-theatrical name. But here comes Black Jack Logan, trailed by 20 people, his staff. He's bringing parts of 3 brigades, and they smash into Cheatham's high water mark soldiers and drive them back. He brings with him, of course, that same piece of that regiment with those 222 Henry rifles. These guys are busy. Well, the fight rages down here at the Bald Hill until about 8 o'clock. As time gets darker, the fighting stops or comes to an end, and the Federals remain in possession of the field, and the Confederates are not. Confederates had about 37,000 troops engaged that day. They lost maybe between 5,000 and 8,000 soldiers. Claiborne himself lost 1,400 of those. Federals had about 30,000 people engaged and had about 3,700 casualties. So the Federals hold the battlefield. This Union victory is the beginning of the end for the South. Fights would occur at Ezra Church, Utoy Creek, and Jonesboro before Hood would finally understand he really wasn't welcome in Atlanta any longer, would abandon Atlanta and go to Tennessee. Federal forces would occupy the city, and many historians attribute the occupation by Sherman of the city of Atlanta leading to the re-election of Lincoln in November of 1864. So there you have an hour and a half condensed into about an hour and a half. If anybody has any questions, I'm be happy to be around afterwards, but I know people want to go have dessert or something.
A number of years ago at a Civil War roundtable meeting, I swear this happened, I don't think I trumped it.
I didn't do that.
Douglas MacArthur's his father or his grandfather was fought at where Piedmont Hospital was, I think.
Right.
And MacArthur's wife's grandfather or father was in the Confederate Army. The story I heard was that when McPherson did his rode out in front of his troops over there on the east side of Atlanta, Mrs. MacArthur's father or grandfather, whoever it was the captain of a unit there, and he gave the order to a Confederate soldier to shoot McPherson. And the guy said, "No, I can't shoot him, he's out there by himself." He said, "Shoot him," and he did. Well, anyway, years later, I asked that question of Franklin Garrett. I said, "Did you tell that story?" He said, "No." And I want to see if you know that story, or if you know if it's even true.
Well, if I had a voice like Franklin Garrett's, I'd tell stories all the time. MacArthur's father, Arthur MacArthur, was a Union soldier. I think he was a member of the Army of the Cumberland. I know he fought at Lookout Mountain. I don't know what his participation was here, and the rest of that story I've not heard before. That doesn't mean it's not true, and it doesn't mean it didn't happen. I just haven't heard about it. Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Jim Hoogworth, and my question is that arguably two of the major wars or battles of the Civil War maybe are the Battle of Atlanta and the Battle at Gettysburg. And the question has to do with how these battlefields have been memorialized. So at Gettysburg, which is very interesting, they also have a cyclorama, which was just restored, and we're working on ours here. And that's going to be great. So at Gettysburg, you can wander the battlefield. They have licensed battlefield guides, and go to the different places where these battles had actually occurred. And battlefield up there, I was told, is encompassed about 25 square miles. Now, I think it was a much larger area here in Atlanta. But, and also, maybe you can answer this question too. There have been some 6,000 books written on the Battle of Gettysburg. And maybe there is some idea of the number of books written on the Battle of Atlanta, but yours is one of them, and I was very interested in it. That you had done the history and searched out all these different areas that you could go and see, but you know they're really not memorialized. Maybe there's a historical plaque there, something like that. But the Battle of Gettysburg has a history that has endured beyond the battle. And a good friend of mine, Dr. Jennifer Murray, wrote a book. It's called On a Great Battlefield, and it's the history of the battlefield after the battle. And I don't think anything like that has been written here, but perhaps you have a comment on how the battlefield has been memorialized. And I also have a comment for the History Museum. If they're interested in having a program at the dedication, I'm sure Dr. Murray would be glad to come down here and have a discussion on how the relationship between the memorialization of these different battlefields, how one contrasts with the other, maybe with a moderator or something like that.
Well, as a good Atlanta booster, I can give you the answer.
Wonderful.
Those people in Gettysburg live in Gettysburg. It's the wave of the past. People who live in Atlanta live in the wave of the future. We don't let buildings stand around that aren't being used or useful. We knock them down and build another one. And we're very fortunate to have the History Center because it does a terrific job of somehow blending the battle itself with what's going on today. And it's just different strokes, I think, for different folks. Now, I will say this about the Battle of Gettysburg. They do have a terrific book written called Killer Angels. It really served as a guide for me. And when I got my book compared, and at least a couple of reviewers saying you got Killer Angels for Gettysburg, and now you got 6 Days in July for the Battle of Atlanta. If I never made a nickel off of it, I'd be pretty happy about it. So I don't know if that's a complete answer to your question, but it's the one I have at this point.
One more question. Was Hood a capable general?
He was a very capable general at the, see how quickly I change when, oh no. He's a very capable general as a division commander and as a brigade commander. He pushed hard and did an excellent job. He's 33 years old when he gets his 4th star. I don't know, when I got promoted to colonel, it took me months to find out where the bathroom was. This guy was going to go fight a battle the next day. Capable, yes. He was, but he's also, he had human frailties. He was very ambitious. He probably bent the rules in some instances. And I don't think he was a great general at the level that the South needed a terrific general. What they got was probably an adequate general. So depending on the circumstances, he did well at one thing and didn't do particularly well at Atlanta. I've talked to lots of people, Gordon Jones among them at the History Center. What else could he do? I don't know what he could have done. So, and I know it's not a great answer, but we'll talk about it sometime when I don't have to be embarrassed in all these front of you.
Thank you, Ken,
Yes,
so
sir.
very, very much.
Thank you.